The night my mother lost the room, she was still smiling. That was the part I remember most. Not the hearing, not the projector, not the quiet that fell over the hall when the numbers finally appeared on the wall. Her smile. The same smile from library photos, donor dinners, newspaper clippings, and every community speech where people called her a hero. Helena Morrow, champion of arts education. The woman who saved children with paintbrushes, music classes, and after-school theater. My mother. She stood in front of the town that loved her and told them the programs were real. And she was not completely lying. That was what made it worse. The children were real. The art was real. The little painted flower pots were real. The songs, the drawings, the messy clay animals, the proud parents holding phones in the back of the room, all of that was real. But the numbers were not. And the money that followed those numbers was not small. I knew that before anyone else in that room knew it. I knew it because I was the person who found the files. I knew it because I was the daughter who did the math. And when the truth finally came out, my mother did not look at the numbers. She looked at me. Like I had betrayed her by refusing to keep her story alive. It started with a grant renewal file on my desk. At first, it looked routine. I worked for the State Arts Commission. My job was not glamorous. I reviewed grant files, checked reports, matched attendance numbers to funding rules, and made sure public money went where people said it went. Most files were boring. That was fine. Boring files paid my rent. This file was for new Bristol Arts for All, the nonprofit my mother had built over most of my life. I had seen that name everywhere growing up. On flyers, on library plaques, on community center banners, on my mother's tote bags, on her speeches. On the version of my childhood where my mother always belonged to everyone else first. I opened the file expecting to check a few boxes and move on. Then I saw the attendance report. The program claimed it had served far more children than could have fit inside the rooms they used. I knew the community center. I knew the room. I had worked there as a teenager. The multi-purpose room was small, cinderblock walls, floor wax smell. Folding chairs stacked in the corner, a fire code sign near the back door. You could not fit that many children in there. Not safely, not realistically. Not even if you packed them shoulder to shoulder and asked them not to breathe. So I did what I always do. I checked the math. The math did not bend. I pulled older files. Same pattern. Inflated attendance. Supply orders too small for the reported numbers. Instructor payments that did not match the number of classes claimed. Reports that made a modest program look massive on paper. My coffee went cold beside me. The fluorescent lights above my cubicle hummed. The office around me kept moving like nothing had changed. But everything had changed, because at the bottom of every report was the same signature. Helena Morrow, executive director, my mother. I stared at her name. I knew that handwriting. The loop of the first letter. The confident sweep at the end. I had seen it on birthday cards, school forms, donation letters, Christmas notes, and the little messages she left on my counter when she wanted me to know she had stopped by. But this was not a birthday card. This was a state grant report. And the numbers attached to her signature were wrong. Not slightly wrong. Not confused. Wrong in a way that had been repeated for years. I printed the pages and took them to my supervisor, Miriam. Miriam had been at the commission long enough to know the difference between a mistake and a pattern. She read the pages quietly. Then she took off her glasses and looked at me. "Tell me you did not alter anything." "I did not." "These are the original files." "Yes." She looked at me for a long moment. "You understand what this means?" It was not a question. "Yes," I said. She locked the pages in her drawer and told me to go home. I did not go home. I went back to my desk and started building the case. Column by column, report by report, line by line. That is how truth works when people have tried to bury it under reputation. You do not scream, you document. My mother's photo hangs in the new Bristol Public Library, or at least it did then. She was standing with a group of children holding painted pots, smiling like she had personally taught the sun how to rise. Under the photo was a small plaque calling her a champion of arts education. I had walked past that photo so many times I barely saw it anymore. That was what growing up as Helena Morrow's daughter felt like. My mother was not just my mother. She belonged to the town. She belonged to donors, to parents, to teachers, to every child who needed a scholarship and every mayor who needed a smiling woman at a ribbon cutting. When I was little, I won a school art fair with a watercolor of the harbor. It was not great. The boats looked like they were floating above the water, but I finished on time, and that was enough to win. My mother framed it. I was proud. Then she hung it in the nonprofit office and told a donor it was from one of the children in the program. I was standing right there. On the drive home, I asked why she had not said it was mine. She said, "People give money to a story, sweetheart. Sometimes the story has to be bigger than us." I did not understand it then. I do now. That was my mother. She did good things, real things. But she also took everything near her and folded it into the story of Helena Morrow, even me. When I was a teenager, I worked at the community center front desk. I checked kids into classes. Even back then, I noticed the sign-in sheets did not always match the reports. When I asked about it, my mother touched my shoulder and said, "Paperwork is complicated. You'll understand when you're older." I got older. I understood too much. I became an accountant, then a grant auditor. I took a state job instead of joining her nonprofit. My mother told people I worked in government the way someone might say I had joined a filing cabinet. She never asked much about my work. That became useful later. She never knew I had bought a small rental property under an LLC, a quiet building with working families and below-market rent. It was the one thing I owned that had not been absorbed into her story. It was mine, not Helena's, not Arts for All's, not a line in one of her speeches. Mine. When I found the grant fraud, I thought about that building. I thought about how much peace there is in owning something nobody can turn into a performance. Then my mother called. Her voice was warm at first. The public voice, the donor voice. "Tessa, sweetheart, I heard something concerning." Of course she had. Small towns have official systems and unofficial systems. The unofficial ones are faster. She had already heard I was reviewing her grant files. I told her it was routine. She told me I must have misunderstood the paperwork. Then her voice sharpened. "If you had questions, you should have come to me first." I followed procedure. "You are going to hurt children," she said. There it was. Not did I do something wrong. Not what did you find. Not let me see the numbers. Children, she put them between us like a shield. "You are going to destroy programs that families depend on," she said. "Programs I built with my own hands. The reports are wrong. You process paperwork in a cubicle," she said. "I have spent my life building trust in this town." Then she said the thing I never forgot. "Think about who they will believe." The line went dead. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my phone. My hands were steady. That surprised me at first. Then I realized maybe I had been waiting for that call for years, waiting for the moment when I would show my mother the truth and she would decide I was the problem. By the next morning, the town had started choosing. I went to my usual coffee shop. The bell above the door chimed the way it always did. The espresso machine hissed. The refrigerator hummed. But the people went quiet. The barista, Jenna, looked down when she saw me. Her daughter had taken classes at Arts for All. There was a photo of the girl in a recital costume taped near the machine. I ordered my usual coffee. Jenna made it without looking at me. I tried to say her name. She said she had to restock cups and disappeared into the back. I stood there holding a coffee that suddenly felt too heavy. At the corner table, my old neighbor looked into her cup like it had urgent news at the bottom. Nobody shouted. Nobody accused me. That would have been easier. They simply looked away. My mother had turned her reputation into a weapon before I had even filed the report, and it worked. For a while. I started with the community center. The building had not changed much. Green metal roof. Old flag out front. Gym smell. Waxed floors. A multi-purpose room with folding chairs and the kind of beige walls every public building seems to share. Bill Hargrove ran the place. He had been there forever, keys on his belt. Maintenance shirt, quiet eyes, The kind of man who notices everything and says very little. He had heard about me already. Causing trouble. He asked. Doing my job, I said. I showed him my state credentials and asked for the room logs. He did not like it, but he gave them to me. The records told a simple story. Arts for All had rented the room a few afternoons each week. The sign-in sheets were still there because Bill kept everything. He kept them in old folders, year after year, even though nobody had ever asked to see them. The actual attendance was modest. A handful of kids some days. A couple dozen on good days, not the huge numbers my mother had reported. Not even close. Bill watched me compare the logs to the grant reports. After a while, he said, "You know, I always wondered." I looked up. "The parking lot was never full," he said. "If there were that many children, there would have been cars, parents, noise, something." He had noticed. Of course he had noticed. People in small towns notice everything. They just do not always say it out loud. I copied the sign-in sheets, then supply orders, then instructor payment records. Everything pointed the same direction. The programs existed. The reports exaggerated them. The funding followed the reports. Before I left, Bill walked me to the door. "Your mother did good things here," he said. "The programs were not fake." I know. They just were not what she said they were. That sentence stayed with me, because that was the whole story. My sister Anjali came to my apartment the next evening. She was wearing a paint-stained cardigan from school. She taught art to children in Providence and was good at it. The kind of teacher kids remember when they grow up. Her face was blotchy from crying. "Mom says you are trying to destroy her." "I am not." "She says you flagged her files. She says you told your supervisors she committed fraud." "I found false reporting." "She says you have always been jealous." I closed my eyes. There it was again, jealous. The family word for any truth Helena Morrow did not like. "Jealous of what?" I asked. "Of her, of the nonprofit, of everything she built." Anjali looked miserable saying it, but she still said it. "She said you took a state job so one day you could have power over her." I looked at my sister. She was crying in my living room, repeating our mother's story like it had been handed to her in a folder. "I did not choose the file," I said. "It landed in my queue. I opened it. The numbers were wrong. I followed the law." "You could have warned her." "So she could fix the numbers before the state saw them." Anjali flinched. "That would be a crime," I said. The word changed the room. Crime, neither of us had said it out loud before. "You do not know that," she whispered. "I know math." Her face crumpled. "I hate this," she said. "I hate that you are doing this to our family." "I am not the one who did it." She left without saying goodbye. After the door closed, I stood in my living room and listened to the sounds of the street below. Then I made the call I had been avoiding. Helena Ruiz, former program coordinator for Arts for All. She answered quietly like she had been waiting. "Tessa," she said, "I think you know why I'm calling." There was a pause. Then she said, "I kept records." We met outside New Bristol because she did not feel safe meeting in my mother's town. That told me enough before she ever opened her bag. Helena sat in the corner of a coffee shop with her back to the wall and a cup of tea she had not touched. She looked tired but not weak. There is a difference. She pulled out a blue spiral notebook, cheap, worn, soft at the edges. "I started keeping this when I realized the reports were wrong," she said. She opened it. Attendance notes, canceled classes, real head counts. Instructor absences, supply shortages. Line after line in careful handwriting. She read a few examples to me. A class reported as full when only a small group had come. A music workshop reported even though the instructor had missed sessions. A summer program funded like a large camp but staffed like a small after-school class. My mother's words appeared in Alina's notes too. "Grant reporting is an art. Focus on the program, not the paperwork. Numbers are flexible." I felt sick, not surprised, just sick. "Why did you stay?" I asked. Helena looked down at the notebook. "Because the children were real," she said. "The programs mattered. The kids who came loved it. They painted. They sang, they made things. Your mother was good at the part that was real. She touched the notebook. I kept this because someday someone would need to know the difference between the real part and the fake part. I asked if she would testify. Her fingers tightened around the mug. If your mother survives this, my career in Bristol County is over, she said. She knows everyone. She will not be the only one with power in the room, I said, but Helena knew the truth. Power does not vanish just because evidence appears. It fights first. The state fraud investigator was named David Park. He worked in a beige office that smelled like old carpet and toner. He had a plant in the corner that looked like it had been dying for a very long time. David did not do small talk. He reviewed my file and questioned everything. The room logs, the sign-in sheets, the vendor invoices, the instructor payments, Helena's notebook. Every claim I made he pushed. Not because he doubted me, because he wanted to know if the case could survive being attacked. It could. At the end, he took off his glasses and leaned back. "This is clean," he said. From David, that was high praise. "The math holds. The evidence lines up. The witness supports the records. This can stand in a public hearing." Public hearing? In my mother's town. In front of donors, parents, board members, neighbors, and everyone who had smiled at her library photo for years. David looked at me. "Are you ready for that?" "I am." Thinking you are ready is not the same as being ready. "I know." He said my mother would probably find out what we had before the hearing. Someone would leak it. A board member. A donor, a friend. That was how these things worked. When people know they are cornered, David said, they become unpredictable. He was right. My mother called a community meeting 2 days before the hearing. She called it a funding update. It was not a funding update. It was a performance. The room was packed. For once, the community center parking lot was actually full. My mother stood at the front in a blue dress, smiling the same smile from the library plaque. She thanked everyone for coming. She said she believed in transparency. Then she told the room that certain people in government did not understand community work. She said bureaucrats cared about numbers more than children. She said people who had never sat beside a child learning to paint had no right to judge the value of art. She did not say my name. She did not need to. People murmured. Heads nodded. Someone said, "Shameful." Then my mother held up a folder. Photos, children's artwork, sign-in sheets, she claimed. Proof, she said, that the programs were real. The room applauded. I stood in the back and listened to a room full of people clap for a lie built on top of something true. That was the hardest part. If the programs had been fake, the choice would have been easier. But they were not fake. They were smaller than she claimed. And she had turned their goodness into cover. After the meeting, I walked into the parking lot. My mother followed me. "Tessa." I turned. The floodlight above the door made her blue dress look darker. "You were there," she said. "Yes." I meant what I said. Those children are real. The children are real. The reports are not. She stepped closer. "You can still stop this." "No." "You can say it was a procedural issue. You can say the file was confusing. Nobody wants the details." "I do." Her face hardened. "No," she said softly. "You want to be right." "I want the truth in the record." She laughed once. A small, cold sound. "You and your records, you think the world runs on numbers. It does not. It runs on stories, on reputation, on what people believe. And the money." Her face did not move. "The money went where it needed to go. To your beach house." There it was. A silence sharp enough to cut skin. She looked at me like I had slapped her. Then she said, "I built something this town needed. You also stole from it." She did not answer. The hearing was 2 nights later. St. Anne's Parish Hall was almost full. Wooden pews, high ceiling, old stained glass, a smell of candle wax and old wood. People whispered when I walked in. Some looked away, some stared. My mother sat near the front with Anjali and members of the board. She looked calm, polished, ready. She spoke first, and she was good, very good. She spoke about children, community, access, creativity, families who could not afford private lessons. Children who found confidence through paint and music. She showed photos, real children, real smiles. That was why people believed her. Because the lie had real children standing in front of it. When she finished, some people clapped. Not everyone, but enough. Then David stood. He did not tell a story. He showed the records, room capacity, rental logs, actual sign-in sheets, supply orders, instructor payments. Every number placed beside the number my mother had reported. The gap was impossible to explain away. The hall went quiet, not polite quiet, real quiet. The kind that happens when people realize they have been clapping for the wrong thing. David called Helena next. She walked to the front holding the blue notebook. Her hands were shaking, but she walked. She sat at the microphone and opened the notebook. She explained her job. She explained the real attendance. She explained the missing classes. She explained the reports she had been told to mark as full. Then she said my mother had told her the numbers did not matter as much as the story. That was the moment the room changed. Not when David showed the math, when Helena gave the math a voice. My mother sat still. Her hands were flat on the table. Her face had lost its color. Anjali was crying silently beside her. The council chair asked if my mother wanted to respond. My mother stood. She walked to the front, opened her mouth. Nothing came out. For the first time in my life, Helena Morrow had no story ready. She looked at the room, the donors, the parents, the neighbors, the coffee shop owner, the librarian, the people who had believed in her longer than they had believed in almost anything. Then she walked back to her seat. She did not speak. The council voted. Funding suspended. Full investigation. My mother removed as executive director. It took only a few minutes. A reputation built over a lifetime did not collapse loudly. It folded, quietly, in front of everyone. I watched my mother walk out of the hall alone. Her heels clicked on the floor. The big wooden door opened, then closed. I did not follow her. I sat in the back row and thought about the watercolor I made as a child. The one she told a donor came from a program student. My mother had said reputation was capital. She was right, but capital runs out if the withdrawals are big enough. The next morning, I went to work. There were messages waiting, some careful, some kind, some angry. Some from people who had looked away from me at the coffee shop and now wanted to say they had always wondered. I answered the ones that needed answering, deleted the rest. Miriam stopped by my cubicle with a new file, different nonprofit, different town. "Whenever you are ready," she said. I opened it after lunch. The numbers were fine. Life has a cruel way of continuing. The state investigation moved forward without me because of conflict rules. That was fine. I had done my part. The beach house went up for sale. The nonprofit got an interim director, a retired educator who cared more about whether children had paper and paint than whether donors stood to clap. The programs continued. Smaller, quieter, honest. That mattered, because the point was never to destroy art for children. The point was to stop using children as cover. Anjali called weeks later. I was at my kitchen table, half working on a crossword I had already abandoned. "Hey," she said. "Hey." She was quiet for a while. I was at the hearing. "I know." "I did not know," she said. Her voice broke. "Tessa, I swear I did not know." "I believe you." "She told me you were jealous. She told me you hated what she built." I believed her. I looked out the window. "I know." "I'm sorry," she said. "I did not say it was okay, because it was not. But I said, 'You're my sister.' That did not change." She cried. I listened. It was not forgiveness, not fully, but it was a door opened just enough for light. Helena later got a job evaluating arts programs for the state. I recommended her. She was good at counting what was really there. She had always been good at that. David's report became a training case for new auditors. He sent me a copy with a sticky note on the front. "Clean math. Good work." For David, that was practically a poem. I still think about Bill Hargrove sometimes. His sign-in sheets. His parking lot. His years of noticing and filing things away because nobody asked. I wonder how many other people like him are out there, keeping quiet records, waiting for someone to show up with the right question. Months later, I went back to New Bristol. The air was cold, the harbor gray, and the summer people were gone. That is when a town shows its real face. No tourists, no bright noise, just the people who stay. I had checked on my rental building that morning. One tenant needed a repair. The plumber was already scheduled. The building was fine, always fine. I parked on Water Street and stood outside the Daily Catch. I had not been inside since the morning Jenna refused to look at me. For a moment, I almost kept walking. Then I opened the door. The bell chimed. Jenna looked up. She saw me. This time, she met my eyes. Medium dark roast. She asked. It was not an apology. It was just a coffee order, but she met my eyes. Yeah, I said. Room for cream. She made it. I paid. She handed me the cup. Thanks, Jenna. Sure. I sat at the window table and wrapped my hands around the coffee while it was still hot. Outside, the harbor was flat and gray. A fishing boat moved slowly through the morning. Inside, the espresso machine hissed, the refrigerator hummed, and someone's phone played a podcast too loudly. Ordinary sounds, ordinary life. My mother's photo was still in the library lobby. Nobody had taken it down yet. Maybe they never would. Some people in town nodded now. Some still looked away. That was fine. Small towns do not change all at once. Neither do families. My mother moved into a smaller place near the water. The investigation continued. There would probably be charges. Maybe a trial. Maybe another room where she would have to sit while people read the truth out loud. I did not know how I would feel when that happened. I still do not. But I know this. The numbers were wrong. The programs were real, but the reports were false. The children mattered, but they were not an excuse. And facts matter even when they hurt, especially when they hurt. I sat at the window table and drank my coffee before it got cold. Months earlier, I had walked out of that same shop feeling like the whole town had pushed me outside. This time I stayed. That was the point.